welcome to the Intuitive Insights podcast series. I'm Nina Lockwood, founder and director of Intuitive Interim and Executive Search. Throughout this series, I will be sharing engaging conversations with talented leaders from across the UK transport sector. Today, I am delighted to welcome Chris Burchell, who was until recently MD of Arriva UK Trains. Chris joined me a couple of days after leaving his role and before he takes up his new position as MD of UK Distribution for SSE. Chris has had a stellar career in rail so far and has built a strong reputation for his knowledge of the industry, but also for being a thoroughly decent chap. He shares with us his story so far, his views on what the future holds for rail, and a couple of anecdotes about his own career as he's gone along his journey. I hope you enjoy. Good morning and welcome to Chris Burchell. I'm absolutely delighted that you've agreed to take part in the Intuitive Insights podcast, Chris. Welcome this morning. And I would normally start with asking about your current role, but at the moment you're kind of just leaving one, recently left your role with Arriva as head of UK Trains and moving into a new role in a different sector. So give us the headlines on that, if you would. But then I'm also really keen to hear your story. I'd like to hear how you got into rail in the first place and your career to date. So over to you.
Yeah, great. Well, good morning. Yeah, great to see you, Nina, and thanks for inviting me on today to talk. As you say, I've recently finished my role as the Arriva UK Trains MD. Very, very recently finished it. Where I was responsible for all of Arriva's rail businesses and rail interests in the UK. And I'm not sure if everyone knows, but Arriva's got obviously a reputation for running rail businesses and train companies, cross country, Chiltern, the Overground, Grand Central. But also Arriva has a big maintenance and overhaul business called Arriva Train Care. We run road transport alternative solutions as well within the UK Trains division. So it's a very busy division with a number of different businesses and actually very different commercial models as well. So it had what was franchises, now obviously in different arrangements with Department for Transport, but it's also got agreements with other clients like Transport for London to run the Overground, and Grand Central is a fully commercial model, and Arriva Train Care is a fully commercial model. So it's quite a varied division, it's quite a varied business, and it was a very, very varied role, which I enjoyed greatly. I did it for 6 years, only finished very recently, and are now in that funny, when people say I'm in between jobs, that's normally means something else, doesn't it? But I am in between jobs, literally. So looking forward to starting a new role with SSE in energy, and I'll be the managing director of their distribution networks. So looking after all their assets, trying to keep the lights on for people in Scotland and in the south, and no doubt getting shouted at if I don't.
Something new to be shouted at for.
Well, I think there are many, many similarities. I'm expecting there'll be lots of differences, of course, but I think there will be lots of similarities between energy distribution and the railway. They're both networks businesses. They've both got consumers. They've both got lots of politics. They've both got regulators. There's a lot of safety aspects to both businesses, of course. Distributed workforces, trade unions, all of those sort of things are quite similar, I think. And sort of businesses that have been privatized were previously nationalized. Culturally, therefore, some similar challenges, I expect. I'm sure there'll be masses of differences as well, but I don't think it will all be completely alien. And I think there's a number of people that have moved over, actually. So Nicola Shaw, of course, now heads up the National Grid and used to be in public transport. Joanna Whittington, who came from energy, came to the rail regulator, is now back in energy. Working for the government in Bays. So, I think people do make these transitions. Heidi Mottram managed to make the transition from rail to water. So I'm hoping if I can be anything like as successful as Heidi and Nicola in their transitions, then I'll be happy.
We shall look forward to seeing that, Chris. I'm sure we'll all be keeping our eye on you and seeing what you're up to.
Yeah, absolutely.
So in terms of going, so that's kind of where you're at now.
Yeah.
I'm really interested to know why rail in the first place. This always fascinates me. How did you get into the rail industry in the first place? What was the attraction?
Yeah, so I think it was more rail chose me, actually, which is a bit weird. I mean, it's funny because after university, I've got a French degree, so it's completely random for the railway. Really, it's random for energy as well, actually, but it's a little bit random. And so after university, I was kind of just open-minded as to what I would do. What I was looking for was a structured graduate training scheme that would give me a nice, soft, gentle introduction into work and understanding what work and business was all about. And so I applied for everything. I mean, literally everything, from sort of the police through to Procter and Gamble to Guinness. That was the one I really wanted. Railways, De La Rue, who make banknotes and things. So I applied to every graduate scheme I could possibly see and think of. So I applied to Railtrack, and the Railtrack graduate scheme was excellent at the time. It was, it was, because it was so soon after privatisation, it looked and felt very much like the BR management scheme, the very celebrated BR management scheme. Yeah. And so they retained all the best bits of that, I think, and it looked really good. And I was really pleased to be successful in getting that. So, the honest answer, which is not an answer I always give, but the honest answer is Railtrack were the first business to send me through an offer letter. Right. And I thought, this is a great scheme. It looks like a great business. Let's get into railways. And I did that. I was pleased I did. My first pay packet arrived within, I think, about £14 of my complete overdraft facility and student loans and everything else being exhausted. So it was great timing for me. Yeah. And I haven't really looked back, and I loved it. So I started with them, general management scheme in Railtrack, which was broadly sort of operations and production. It's funny that they asked you where would you want to be allocated locationally, and it was, of course, a national thing. And they said, everyone puts London down, and if you don't want London, then people either go for Manchester or York or whatever. And I saw that Swindon was there, and I thought, well, Swindon's not far from London, is it? So maybe I'll put Swindon down as my second choice. And they laughed at me and they said, no one ever puts Swindon down. So the fact that you expressed anything towards Swindon meant that you're going to be put into Swindon. So I was allocated to the Great Western Zone, as it was then. And as general management, learned operations, spent time in Webhouse and crew, learning signalling and all of that, and learning bell codes and stuff. There was a cohort of about 10 of us. It was fantastic. We had a great time. We learned everything. We learned all aspects of the business. The Great Western Zone was a great place to be. Swindon was fantastic, and Great Western is a great region, and it's a good place to learn. I had some great mentors there and some great people to learn from, people like Andrew McNaughton, the late Derek Holmes, sadly, of course, but he was my production director at some point. So I learned an awful lot. Peter Leppard, another one from Great Western, really great leaders, and I was allowed to focus on operations. I spent 6 weeks down in Cornwall learning how to signal trains. Brilliant. And it gave you such a good grounding, a really good grounding in actually what it is to do the work of rail. So what it is to be out on a possession, what it is to do the operational checks, what it is to respond to incidents, all of that stuff. And that equipped me then to move from sort of the far west into the eastern side of the zone, and I moved to support the Heathrow Express implementation team. Can you believe that?
Wow. Okay.
So this was when the tunnel to Heathrow wasn't even open. So they were just running. They had a temporary station. I don't know if you remember. They had a little temporary station, and the train would run to Hayes and Harlington, turn the corner, and sort of stop at the temporary station. And people get onto buses to go to Heathrow. Right. But it's just to get the operation up and running. And I was asked to sort of support that effort as a kind of fresh graduate that's kind of got a basic understanding of operations. And I was allocated to the Hayes and Harlington Mobile Operations Managers team, which was a brilliant, lovely people. And I learned so much from them and had such a great laugh with them as well. And they sort of put me under their wing. They described me as the fast action response team for Heathrow. It was only later I realised what the acronym meant. But a bit slow on the uptake, I can do a bit of banter, but that's fine. And then, that was successful. And then I moved up through the ranks quite quickly in operations, did performance management, getting into all the systems and processes for performance improvement, safety management, operations management, and then became the production manager for the Thames Valley area really quite quickly. Great team, great signal boxes, great frontline teams. We sadly suffered the tragedy in 1999 of Ladbroke Grove. I was the area operations manager at the time, and my goodness, that changes everything. That changes your life. That obviously that's horrific for the people, obviously the families involved and the staff involved. And actually, I learned a lot as a young manager, having to manage the trauma and the effect that has on teams. Not just in the moment and in the event and in the week after, but months and months afterwards. That really does affect people. The railway is a very close family, and when horrific accidents like that happen, particularly where there's loss of life, it really does affect everybody very, very deeply. And that was challenging, really challenging, leading people through that time, going through the public inquiries. And you grow up very quickly, I think. But then I left Railtrack in 2001 and went to the Foreign Office, which is where my French degree comes in. You see, that was all
right. Okay.
What I thought I would do is become a diplomat and go and sit by pools and help people with consulates and things like that. The Foreign Office didn't work out completely. I was there for 18 months, and then I came back to rail, but this time on the passenger side, with Thames Trains. Lovely little business running the passenger services, the commuter services out of Paddington, sort of down to Newbury, Reading, up to Oxford and the Cotswolds and so on. I was operations director there, but didn't last very long, because in those days, I was telling someone this the other day, in those days, owning groups could make unsolicited bids for other networks. So Thames wasn't necessarily put out to tender, I don't think, but I think First Group sort of submitted a bid to say, if we were to take it over, this is what we could do. And that was accepted. So First eventually swallowed up Thames Trains, but before I could be transferred, my boss sort of picked me up and dropped me into South Central as the operations director, which was a much bigger business with many bigger challenges. More trains. This was the time when all the new trains, the Electrostars, were being introduced. There wasn't enough space to store the old trains and the new trains, to maintain the new trains. The new trains were like rocket science compared to sort of the old trains in terms of the assets and what you needed to do to them. We didn't have enough drivers. It was just problem after problem in terms of managing this. And so dropping into that as operations director, working for Charles Horton as the MD, what an experience that was. We got on top of that, and then so 2 years later, when Govir won the Southeastern franchise, Keith Ludeman asked me to run the Southern business as MD. It was funny, there was a story that Keith took me up to the Fifth Office in Go Ahead House in Croydon after we won the Southeastern franchise. And I kind of thought Charles was going to go over to Southeastern to run it. And I was fully expecting Keith to say to me, we'd like you to go and be the operations director and do what you did in Southern over in Southeastern. That's exactly what I was expecting. So I'd already got my speech ready. He's going to go, well, I've kind of done that, Keith. I'm not sure I want to do it again. And he didn't. He said, I'd like you to step up and be the MD of Southern. Wow. And I do remember exactly what I said. I was really stunned. I wasn't expecting it at all. I said, well, Keith, I don't really know what to say. And he went, well, it's pretty obvious, isn't it, you idiot? You say yes. so I did, and then sort of saw Southern through the rest of that franchise, won the new franchise, saw it through that franchise, bid then for, supported the Govir bid for TSGN, the Thameslink, in the big GTR franchise as it is now, and then moved to Arriva in 2014. To run a portfolio of businesses, so multiple businesses, multiple talks, different level, different strategy, different requirement, but also fantastic experience. Arriva's a great culture, it's got a great team. Really thoroughly enjoyed my time there, getting the business to work better together, engaging, changing, innovating, really positive. And clearly there were some challenges in Northern that Arriva that we all had to navigate through, and that was a very difficult period. But there's reasons for that, and there's a lot of circumstance involved in the Northern story, which is for another day perhaps. But outside of that, the Arriva team is fantastic and delivers some great services, and it's a really good business.
Fantastic! I love that story. I love it. I just I'm really privileged because I get to speak to so many people about their careers, what they've done, and how they've got to where they are. I really am so interested in hearing about it. And you can see kind of from starting at Railtrack, having experience of different areas, and then yes, kind of popping out for a bit to the Foreign Office, but then coming back to do the other side of rail. So you've got experience of the both, which I think the people who can relate to whether you're doing the passenger side, whether you're doing the infrastructure side, being able to appreciate the view from both is really key. And I think becoming even more important actually as we move forward.
And people do say, don't they, Nina, that one of the downsides of the last 20 years is that fragmentation, the fact that people only experience one part of the railway. Yeah. And it's something that I banged on about for a long, long time now, is around we have to look at the railway as a system. And the system has different bits of it and different parts of it. But if you don't look and think about the railway as a system, you're going to make some pretty perverse decisions. Yeah. And some of the problems that we've faced and are facing now in UK rail are around the fact that we haven't looked at something as a system. Mm. And I think you do need to understand how the other part works, how asset management works, how networks work, how the full operations work. And on that, if you're sitting in that side of the environment, you do need to understand how train crew work and how allocations work and rostering and diagramming and all of that. And if you don't understand all of it, or at least have an appreciation of all of it, then you start to think that people are being obstructive or difficult or don't understand how important your bit is. Yeah. And of course, that's never the case. People are always, it's something I always say, they act rationally against the incentives that they're given. Mm. And it's, you can create a lot of friction and a lot of wasted time and effort because people don't understand the system.
Yes. Yeah, I completely agree. One of the things that has come out, I think, of this recent experience that we've had and are still having with the COVID response and the management of that crisis by the industry. There's so many people saying to me at the moment that the best thing to come out of it so far has been the increased amount of collaboration, not just between passenger and infrastructure, so not just the TOCs and Network Rail, but also the DfT in that. Mm-hmm. And I'm sure some would look at that more favourably than others, but there has been an increase in collaboration. But also, I'm told, from the trade union perspective as well. So all parties, all stakeholders working together to do that one system thinking without even really on purpose. It was just what needed to happen.
It's funny, because you're absolutely right. And collaboration is one of the big hallmarks, really, of 2020, despite the horror that we've all had to suffer. And it hasn't happened across the system. It has happened because, it's very simple and easy to just take your perspective on things when you're working. But in a crisis, the railway does always step up, and you can't always rely on that to happen, but it always does. And it is astonishing how well people come together to manage and handle that. And you're right, authorities like the DfT and other clients have stepped up and understood their role. But I think infrastructure operators and our people and our unions, it's been exceptional, actually. And it's almost been working around the existing structures to do that. So, I was heavily involved working with all the general secretaries of the trade unions through the pandemic, through something that we called the Rail Industry Coronavirus Forum, right. RISIF for short. And it was right at the beginning when none of us really knew what this pandemic was going to be about. It was quite challenging to kind of say, actually, it could make sense for us to kind of just talk and work things through and have common ways of dealing with things. This was even before people were recognizing that face masks were an important aspect of control of the virus. We just didn't really know the role that face masks would play. So we had lengthy debates around face coverings, face masks, what grade of mask, what do you do? What's the right thing to do in terms of NHS supplies versus railway supplies? And how do you keep people safe? How do you keep work environment safe? How do we keep working and keep the railway running? And I have to say, the general secretaries were excellent. And I think the industry was excellent in terms of just, this is a real this is a real human thing that we have to deal with here, and we've got an economic responsibility, and we've got a safety responsibility to our people and to our customers. And there's a whole bunch of key workers that we've got to keep getting to hospitals and to their locations. And we found a way to do it that wasn't overly emotional, that wasn't too difficult, that wasn't overly commercial. We just found a way to do it, and that way of working is what we're going to need more of going forward. And I think a number of people are saying, that did seem to work really well. So how do we bottle that and then take that forward to the next challenge? It's a bit like after the Olympics, and everyone went, that was amazing. How did we do that? How do we keep doing that? And there was very, very much a focal point on the Olympics, wasn't there? Because it was 3 weeks of games and then the Paralympics, and it was a real goal for people. They could focus on. This is a little bit different because no one really knows how long it's going to go on for. We kind of thought it might be over by now. At the beginning, in March, April, we kind of thought, it'd be done by the end of the year, wouldn't it? And it clearly isn't. But I think the learning that we've got around how we can work, how we can collaborate, how we can deal with really tough stuff, but not fall out, is what we've got to keep going. Because there is a lot of challenge to come for the railway, and we're going to need that kind of behaviour to persist.
Yeah, absolutely agree. There are definitely challenges ahead. I think that I completely agree with you, Chris. I think the response from the industry has been amazing at every level. And yes, there will be challenges, but there will also be opportunities. And so I'm really keen to know what you think are the opportunities for the industry moving forward. And I'm going to grant you 3 wishes in my fairy godmother-esque mode, and say to you, so what do you think are the opportunities for us?
Yeah.
If there were 3 things, if you could only have 3 things that we would change to move towards this new normal, whatever that will look like, what would those 3 wishes be?
Okay, so let's just talk about the opportunities first, and then I'll sort of come back to you on those specifics, because that gives me thinking time, right? So, look, I mean, clearly we're at a bit of a crossroads, and the pandemic does put into real heightened focus 2 things, really. I think the affordability model for rail and how you fund it, and then the sustainability model for rail. So we all know the benefits of rail. Rail is a fantastic driver of economic growth. It's a fantastic driver of social inclusion. It brings communities closer together. It brings workplaces closer together. It connects you for leisure. It connects, all this economic activity and social activity. So the fundamental value of rail remains. That the question is, how do we do that in an affordable way if we haven't got as many people travelling, or if people's work patterns have changed, and so on. So I think the first thing for me is, let's not do anything now that fundamentally undermines the long-term role that rail can play. So we might be tempted. Everything's costing the Treasury an absolute fortune. Rail is one of those things that's costing the Treasury an absolute fortune. The temptation will be, let's do some quick cuts. Let's do something that really reduces the cost of the railway quickly. We know, don't we, that putting stuff back in rail takes a long, long time, and sometimes it never goes back. So I think we have to have that long-term mindset. As painful as that might be, we have to have a long-term mindset. Then I think we've got to tailor the railway to the reality that we're now facing. And that's where some of the opportunities come in. Yeah. So, it was, I remember we were in Southern at the time, and I think I was the ops director. So it was really early on in my Southern experience. And we had some major crisis was going on. I can't remember the specifics of the crisis. And Vince Lucas was the commercial director. And Vince was in the office next door to me, and he popped his head round. And he said, look, the thing is, you've got to have a mental model with problems like this, because in every single crisis, you've always got to find the opportunity, because there always will be. No matter how bad it is, there will always be an opportunity in there. And I thought, as the operator, how can you think like that? It's just ridiculous. It's such a disaster. And then I stopped and thought, actually, he's really right. If you focus on, okay, it is a disaster, let me just get my head around it, but now let's focus on what we can do and what we can achieve, then actually it's a much more positive mindset, but you get more done. and you will seize the opportunity that exists. So I think the wishes I would have around the opportunities that I can see, the first would be to make sure that in whatever changes we make and whatever evolution we have in rail, it's so important to involve and engage those that are closest to delivery. Now, by that I mean a range of things. That could mean, people could interpret that as devolution. So local authorities should have more of a say about the services that they have in their area, which I think is right. But it also means that our people could have more of a say. It also means that operators that are closest to customers, who understand the local markets, really need to be shaping and helping, because I think there will be a temptation to centralize everything, and to have a single way of doing things, which, there are many cases where that's a good thing to do. So if you take ticketing, for example, we don't want 20 different smart cards and systems and back offices and all that sort of stuff. So actually having a single way of doing some of that stuff that applies to everybody makes some sense. But most of rail is local. So it's a national product, but it is locally tailored and locally delivered. And customers are different depending on the network. So we have to make sure, it's a really key wish, that we have that voice and that understanding in whatever design of solution we have. If it becomes too generic, too national, too one way, then I think we will lose the quality and the value of rail at a local level. So that's the first thing. The second thing I would wish for is, and this might seem a bit odd actually, and maybe a bit technical, but the second wish I would have is that we have to collectively recognise the role and the critical importance that specification has in driving all of the outcomes that we have. So let me explain what I mean by that. We're likely to have new commercial arrangements. We're likely to have some new structures. Don't know what it looks like yet, and we're all working on what that could be. But what is fundamental in every single situation, whether it's a nationalised industry, privatised industry, franchise, concession, whatever, the specification of what you want and how that is put into contract drives everything. And if that specification is unrealistic, unachievable, unfinanceable, then don't be surprised if things fail. And I say this because of a reflection on some of the areas in franchising. A lot of that ties back to, were those specifications too ambitious? The contract reflects the specification, and they reflect the bid that people put in, of course. But that specification has to be right. And just when we say concessions versus franchises, as a topic of debate at the moment, a concession is a commercial model, but if you don't specify it properly, then you'll get a silly outcome. And if you over specify it, or you over control it, or you under control it, you'll get the wrong outcome. So clients need to really understand what they're asking for and why they're asking for it, and what they need to have in place to make it work. And then the supply chain and the contractors and the operators and the infrastructure parties, if there are those as well, can then respond appropriately. So that is really, really important. We have to get that bit absolutely right. And then I think the third thing, and the obvious thing for me, is what an opportunity we now have to really accelerate innovation and modernisation for our network, for customers. There's this thing, in crisis, innovation and transformation is always accelerated, isn't it? And people say in war, you always get the most technological advances because people have to modernize quickly. I'm not suggesting we're in a wartime situation, but we are in a situation where there's a massive opportunity now to really grasp the nettle of modernizing some key things. Our fare system is so horrifically complicated, and no one understands it except a couple of really clever people in some talks. Why not simplify all of that? If we've got a challenge to regrow revenue and to encourage people back, one of the things that gets in the way is that the people are worried about fares and how accurate and how cheap their fares. If they got the best deal, can I do better? What if I travel earlier, later, whatever? We just have to make that easier, remove the barriers, remove the friction for people accessing our product and accessing our network. So sorting out the fare system, sorting out ticketing, modernizing the way we interact and interface with our customers so that it has a modern experience. That doesn't ever mean, and I always consistently say this, it doesn't mean de-staffing the railway, but it does mean using our people to better effect, and using them in a way that customers really need them to be used now. I think if we try and preserve the old railway, in the old way of doing things with old ticketing, old fares, we will not adapt quickly enough for the new challenge that we've got. And it's quite clear the customer challenge in the future will be quite different. Customers want different things. They're going to use the railway differently, probably. So we should be adapting to that and making the most of it. That's the opportunity. That's the Vince Lucas opportunity. Grab that and we'll recover revenue quicker. If we fail to do that, then we'll be losing money. We wouldn't necessarily see it. We'll be left on the table somewhere.
Yeah, absolutely agree. Could not agree more. I think that this whole experience that we're going through as an industry, as a nation, globally, we would not have wanted that. We would never have chosen to have gone through this. No. But for me, the opportunity is, but we're there now. And I've shared this with lots of people, so the people listening to this will be thinking, oh, here she goes again with her eggs. But there's this somebody shared with me years and years ago in the context of change management, you can't make an omelette without breaking eggs. And I think as an industry, my take on it, having been, I've just passed my 8-year anniversary, so I'm still very much the new girl. But I think as an industry, we had our eggs in this beautiful basket surrounded by fur and cotton wool and bubble wrap, and they were all very safe. The way we do things is very safe. We're risk averse, that by the nature of what we do. It's a very obviously safety critical industry, so people tend to behave in a very risk averse way. What COVID has done is taken that basket and just thrown it on the floor, up in the air, whatever. The eggs are smashed. We need to make something different. And it's an opportunity to do that. And if 12 months ago somebody had said to the people in the operating railway that we're going to just take your customers away for a bit, we'll don't worry about your revenue and your cost, but we want you just to think about starting again. If we were going to start the railway again, what would you do differently? So, my God, what an amazing opportunity that would be. Obviously, it hasn't happened in that context, but nonetheless, it's still an opportunity to do something different. I completely agree. I think your 3 wishes are fantastic.
You're very right. And I think we've got to, sometimes we look at this from a kind of, railways in or railways out perspective. So you've asked me 3 wishes. As someone that has worked in rail, I'm thinking this is what rail needs to do. I think we've also got to look at it from an outside in view as well, because what does the country need from the railway? If you think about the sustainability point, so affordability and modernising and making sure that it's fit for the future is critical. But the sustainability role that rail has to play is really crucial. And as we're heading, trying to get to net zero by 2050, rail will have to be a big part of that. And if we rebuild back now, post-pandemic, with a car-led recovery, because we haven't made people feel confident and safe to use the rail network, or we've not adapted the product to suit them better for their needs, and we miss that and we push them back into their cars or into other modes, well, that's letting the country down, because that will mean that we'll have not only be choking our cities in a much greater way from an air quality perspective, but it's not sustainable. It's just not sustainable in terms of the economic value, the productivity value, and all of the other benefits that rail can offer. So there's a real obligation here, I think, on all parties to make sure the railway does its bit, not just next year, but for the next 20 years.
There's an obligation as well as an opportunity. I like that one.
Absolutely.
I like that. Thank you, Chris. And so, as we've mentioned a few times, clearly we've been through an interesting period of time. I'd love to know what you've learnt. When we look back over the last 7 months of being kind of everything thrown up in the air and everything being different, from a professional and a personal perspective, how are you different? What have you learnt, and what are you doing differently?
Good question. I mean, interesting is the most understated.
Absolutely, yeah.
To that term you could possibly have spoke English. I mean, look, we talked about it previously. I think the thing that learned or been reminded of is just how we can come together effectively to manage these challenging times. It's governments, it's businesses, it's trade unions, it's everybody, where there's a common objective. And it reminds me, and the thing I've learned is that actually most of the time we do have a common objective. Government has a common objective with operators, with Network Rail, with unions. We want the railway to be a success and to be contributing to the country. It's only when you get into the sort of tiny detail that sometimes those interests vary or point in the wrong directions. And that's back to the point about system, really. You've got to look at it as a system and make sure we're pointing in the same direction. Because ultimately, we actually all want and need the railway to be a success. So that sort of goal alignment piece, when we are aligned short term and long term, we can achieve amazing things together. And I think that is the opportunity going forward. How do you get that goal alignment in the short term and the long term vision for rail that is modern, future proofed, innovative, progressive, that isn't threatening to unions, isn't threatening to people, has opportunity around better skills, better jobs, etc., etc. That's the key learning for me, and it's about how to harness that really in the next few months as we still continue to navigate the crisis. I think from a personal basis, in common with many other people, I think my eyes have been opened around different work-life balance. And actually the opportunity to have a different balance from a work-life perspective has been really educational in terms of helping to manage one's own energy, actually. It was quite strange, getting to the end of the week and not being completely exhausted and falling asleep by 9 o'clock. Just as my wife is going, come on, let's get out, it's Friday, let's go out to the pub. And I'm like, oh, I'm exhausted, I just want to not being in that state was really quite amazing. And so I've enjoyed that. But isn't this the worry for us? Isn't this what we have to tackle? Because I would personally say, as a real rail advocate, I've enjoyed being around at home more. I've enjoyed spending more time with my kids. I've been enjoying helping homework, having discussion, having dinner. I've never eat with them in the week. Eat with the family. Been able to do a bit more exercise. So all of that is much more healthy for yourself in a kind of balanced way, in a mental well-being way. But it all trades from not having that commute.
Yeah. And
that's the point, isn't it? That's the worry. And if I'm thinking that and thinking, oh, I don't mind not commuting, then we have a real challenge to get people back. I've missed work. I've missed seeing people. I've missed the collaboration you get and the banter you get and the side conversations you get from meetings, and the fact you can read people's body language much better than you can using technology. I mean, Teams, Zoom, brilliant, but it's not the same. And I have really missed all of that, but I haven't missed the commute. And I think that's where a number of people's heads will be. And it's how we tackle that challenge going forward to make sure that rail still has a role to play.
Completely agree. I think my own view on that is that the pendulum has not stopped swinging. It is still moving in relation to the remote working from home. Many people I'm speaking to are in a position where they don't want to work from home full time. They are missing the social interaction, everything that you've just said, missing being out of the house. And we've got people as well, obviously, who are living on their own. So that not having any work interaction, being really limited in terms of what you can do socially, and therefore being stuck in the same four walls. So my prediction is that the pendulum will start to swing back, but I do think that railway needs to, as I know is happening in a lot of places already, needs to look at the leisure market and how we make ourselves more attractive to people who are travelling, not from a commuting perspective, but to do in their leisure activities.
Yeah.
So lots to do and lots of opportunities. As we've gone through this conversation, Chris, you have mentioned a few names in relation to people you've worked with and people you've learnt from. Just as we bring our conversation to a close, I'm really interested to hear who's influenced you. Whose leadership skills have you? And you don't have to name names. You can talk about what you know, what you've learned, what you've been inspired by, what motivates you and gives you the energy to then do what you do with your teams as a leader.
So I think there's a number of people to talk about. Influences, certainly, and they're not all people I've worked for. Actually, there's other external influences as well. But I think I learned most leadership style, different leadership style when I worked with Keith Ludeman, who was chief executive of the Go Ahead Group for a period of time, now still very active in the non-exec world. But he was chief exec of Go Ahead, running the sort of Thames Trains, South Central and South Eastern franchises, and then West Midlands for a bit. He just had a different approach, and it was interesting because when you first start work, you're taught how things work in that organisation, and almost you kind of think, well, that's what I know, and that's how things are. And perhaps you don't appreciate that different organisations do things in different ways, different leaders do things in different ways. And Keith was just very different, and the way he assessed his teams and the way he assessed his recruitment was quite different. It was very much looking at things like individual motivations. Why would this person be motivated to do a good job? How does that fit with the rest of the team? He was very, very engaging, very, very motivating. His manner of giving objectives was very broad, gave you lots of space to work, not hundreds and millions of KPIs and tests, because you've got no chance of ever hitting all of them. It was very broad, which I really appreciated, because that actually gave you a lot of autonomy in a way. But it wasn't, because he would always keep a close check on you in terms of what you were doing. So he was always there, and he was always incredibly fair. And I remember Mike Hodson, who used to run London Midland for a time. He was also my MD at Thames Trains as well. But I was sort of saying to Mike, what's Keith like to work for? And he said, you don't ever need to sort of go to Keith and ask for things. He will look after you, and he'll be there for you, and it'll be when you least realise it. And it's absolutely true. There was times I'm thinking, I'm working flipping hard here. I've done a really good job, and then Keith would literally call you the next week and go, I think you've done a brilliant job. Here's a little increment and here's a little challenge for you. And it was amazing. Really, really smart management, really, and created a huge amount of loyalty actually amongst his team. I've worked for many other great people. I'm not saying no one else is,
but clearly Keith stands out.
Looking at Keith and thinking, how do I take some of that into what I do? The other big influences I've had, there was a moment when I thought how to manage was very much command and control. Lots of data, lots of targets, give people tons of objectives, really manage them hard, and that was the way to achieve performance. And you can get performance done in that way. But I saw an advert again early on in my sort of southern career for a conference, and the conference was called Freedom from Command and Control.
Okay.
That sounds quite exciting in terms of management philosophy and so forth. So I went to go and see this. I was given permission to go to this conference, and I tell you, it blew my mind. It just completely blew my mind. Sometimes these life-changing events. It was just a one-day conference in Edinburgh.
Yeah.
But there's this guy called John Seddon, and he looked at how to effectively implement systems thinking into service industries, and he totally changed. He was very anti-targets. He says targets drive abusive behaviour. They drive people focusing on just the target rather than the system output, and it gets quite technical at times. But when you think about it, you kind of think actually most of what we do is wrong. And you can't change it in terms of, because it's just so institutionalized. But actually, if you're really trying to improve outputs, you need to take a much more production line focus in the way that Toyota do for production, but try and apply that to a service industry. And that really did transform, the way I thought about how you manage and how you help people and how you should lead. And the fact that you should have this upside down triangle that people talk about, that our frontline teams are the people that we are serving as managers. We're not telling them what to do, we're trying to help them do the job better. And once you get your head around that kind of philosophical shift, it really does change the way you want to manage and lead. So I'd recommend that to people. It is in a book if people want to read it.
I was just going to ask you that, Chris, actually. I'll be Googling that later. So John Seddon. The mastermind behind it.
He's published a book called Freedom from Command and Control. It's quite old now, I think, probably, but it did change my thinking completely. Can I have one other? I'll mention.
Of course you can. Yeah.
Called. You may even know them. Do you know Mike Finnegan?
I do. Yeah, because Mike Finnegan's from my part of the world, isn't he? If we're talking about the same Mike Finnegan,
he is. Yeah. And I spent a bit of time working with Mike. couple of years ago.
Oh, wow.
Which was, again, really eye-opening. And that the thing that I learned from Mike, which is, what he's brilliant at, is teaching you that you are in complete control of how you feel and your attitude all the time. No matter what happens, you are in complete control of it. And you can effectively set out to achieve anything if you put your mind to it and you have the right mental approach. And in managing dark moments, and I've had a couple of dark moments in the last couple of years, that was really, really vital. And helps with resilience, helps with mental strength, helps with getting you through trauma and crisis, but also in the good times as well, because it keeps you grounded. So what a superstar Mike is. Really excellent.
Yeah, I agree. It's some time since I saw him, actually, so you've put him back in my head. I shall have to reach out. And I love that. That is definitely my philosophy as well. I think I talk a lot, actually, to my teenage daughter at the moment about this. Whatever happens, whatever situation you're in, and whatever other people are saying or doing or what's going on in the world, ultimately we have a choice on how we respond to that. And you can either respond negatively or positively. And that is actually always your responsibility. It's always your choice. So I'm fully on board with that philosophy. Sometimes it feels a bit hard, and sometimes it feels a bit like I don't want to choose. Don't make me choose, because it's just too difficult. But ultimately, we are all in charge of our own destiny, even though sometimes that feels like a bit of a tough task. A quote, please. A favourite quote in terms of something that you might turn to, something that inspires you, something that's made you think. And I'm sure that there will be lots of them, but I'm curious to know if there's one that you can share with us today, just to kind of bring our conversation to a close.
Yeah, so I have got one, and I can't. The trouble with this quote is it's a brilliant quote, but I can't attribute it with any accuracy.
Okay.
It was I heard it first from Charles Horton when he was MD of Southern, and he quoted it, and he attributed it to one of the BRB chairmen. I think it was Peter Parker, but I don't know if it's true or not. And I've Googled it incessantly for many times, trying to see if there is any kind of provenance or any kind of support for this. But it comes to mind whenever, and it's so apt for the railway. It's perfect for the railway because even if it's a short-term incident, or long-term crisis, this quote always just sorts you out. And it goes. Charles said, if you're in a hole, and when we were in a hole in Southern, he said, you can't pull up your socks whilst you're wringing your hands.
I love it.
So, stop worrying about all that. Stop getting all anxious about how awful it all is. Pull up your socks and get on with it.
Fantastic. I love that. What a brilliant quote. I'm going to use that one, most definitely. And I will attribute it to you via whoever came up with it in the first place.
Well, if you can find the provenance of it, and if you can confirm whether it was Peter Parker or not, then that would be great.
Well, we'll put it out there, and hopefully somebody who's watching the podcast might know, because they'll
tell me how wrong I am. Yeah,
there will be many of our railway family colleagues who will be tuning in. Chris, it's been an absolute pleasure. Every conversation I've ever had with you always is interesting. I always learn something. I've learned loads this morning, and I'm really grateful to you for giving up some of your time in between roles to talk to me on Intuitive Insights podcast. I will be watching with interest to see how successful and been so hugely successful in your new role. And as you know, I've got a tenner on you coming back into the rail industry, so I'll look forward to that time. Take care, Chris. Thanks ever so much.
Thanks for the invitation. I really enjoyed it.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
My huge thanks to Chris for sharing his thoughts on the latest episode of Intuitive Insights. The next episode will be with you in 2 weeks' time, when I'm joined by Louise Cheeseman, MD of Hull Trains, and the person who is adamant that she wasn't the one who delivered the Olympics. We'll see you then.